Hello, everybody, and welcome to our Church of Union dialogue today. One of the things we'd like to do is reintroduce our title, which now we called Our World Today, the Unionist Perspective. And we believe that it was necessary for a change in title to more reflect the truth of what we're actually doing in this dialogue, which is providing the unionist perspective on world news that we believe is relevant and topical. So today we start off part one of our new series of conversations. So welcome to the team and welcome to everybody. And also please feel free to like and subscribe to our Church of Union YouTube channel, where you will find all our previous conversations. And you will also find the continuation of the conversations in this new format. So for today, I think the topics that really stood out for us have a significant impact in just how we are viewing our world today. And I think the primary one for me that stands out is the resignation of the Prime Minister of New Zealand, Jacinda Ardern, who has quoted burnout as the reason for stepping down as the Prime Minister. And from a mental health point of view, we believe that it's a significant topic to consider, given that in her sharing her decision with her country, she cited burnout, but also some of the real stress that has been attached to the role over her tenure. She was also probably dubbed one of the rock star prime ministers, just given how New Zealand actually responded not only to the COVID pandemic, but other things in the country, including crime and poverty and probably some racially motivated killings as well and that kind of stuff. So yeah, I think it is significant that at the age of 42, she's chosen to step down from a role where we would probably see in most countries that the incumbent is probably slightly older. Probably in their mid to late 50s or even later. We see lots of presidents in their late 50s, early 60s. We also see some of them hanging on for dear life until the late 80s. So yeah, it's interesting to see somebody choosing their well-being and their health over their desire for power. So that's something that really stood out for me. So I'd like to open it up to the team and let's allow the conversation to flow progressively. So thank you, everybody.
Hey, I would like to speak on that. I saw a TikTok video and I wish I had saved it for later, but I don't know what I was doing. Basically, I forgot what it was, who posted it, but it was about Ardern, and also a CEO of one of the biggest companies in the world, and how they were like managing their leadership. And the guy was praising the fact that it felt he really had the feeling, the vibration of like these women are choosing things that are different from what we see in a male-dominated leadership world. And it was interesting. And I think the fact that she's choosing her mental health, and also the fact that she's choosing like to prioritize her marriage right now, her future marriage, I think is what I guess millennials kind of are prioritizing too, because basically when we go into the generation of our parents, between like 60s to 80s and older, they prioritize getting an education and having a career to be happy in life, which is not what we believe anymore. And so that's why we have seen countless women speaking out about like burnout and mental health. And I think it's interesting to see that it's global, and it's not because you did a bad job or a good job, but basically you're stepping out. It's less about power, is what I meant to say, and more about like actually taking care of your personal health and life. And I think I prefer that to, you know, presidents using crack just to get going until basically they die, or pass the power to someone else who will do the same. And obviously, consciousness and the society are not yet ready and kind of prepared on how to handle that pretty well. But I don't know, there's just something that feels good about it. And just what I read about like female leadership this year and how it was managed. And but it was definitely more stable. Just because it was emotional and personal doesn't mean that it wasn't more stable. It was actually more stable than things that we've seen in the past. So yeah, I don't know how you guys feel about that.
I agree with you, and those are the things that were coming to mind as well. But just to play like devil's advocate a little bit, like the article that I think Sage posted, it was, I mean, people were suggesting that, or from reading between the lines, because they mentioned that I guess the popularity of her political party has been going down. And so to me, like just even mentioning that makes me think that they're trying to suggest that perhaps she's doing it for other reasons, maybe in addition or other than, you know, her personal reasons. So I kind of wanted to ask you guys, because I was feeling the same things as we've mentioned, you know, just prior, like she's doing it for her mental health. And it really stands out that, you know, it's unique to what we usually see, but could there be other reasons for it as well? I don't know. I'm curious what you guys think.
So I have to say that there would probably be a number of perspectives, but I feel like logically, whether it's because the party and her own personal popularity as prime minister is reducing or not, the fact that there's a very personal, very real, almost a real share of an emotion, almost kind of, to me, a little bit moves it from the perspective of, at the core, I feel like the choice to honor herself as opposed to honoring the power or the popularity stands out for me more, which feels more truthful. It feels more truthful to have a sense that somebody is honoring where they are in their life and what they believe, or even if it's a bit of a deflection, but it feels more real to me, which feels more truthful. So like that's kind of the feeling into that distinction a little bit for me.
I have to agree with you. There's just this feeling that we didn't have when we talked about prior people stepping down from power. And I think politics is never really like 100% disinterested. So obviously there could be a reason about like trying to save a party. But I mean, if it's just strategy, well, it's not like that bad. Like, why not stepping down to save a party? Doesn't seem like something extraordinary or outrageous. So yeah, but there's just that feeling, and I can't remember the examples of like people stepping down that we talked about through the last year, but it just feels different, in my opinion.
Also, I also feel like there's an almost self-sacrificial component to sharing something as personal and as important as your mental health in that kind of political sphere that could be almost, it could almost be like a two-edged sword. So you share it to say you're stepping down, and later in life, should you choose to re-enter that kind of political arena, this is something that people will quote going forward because it's now in the public domain. It's not only national news, it's international news. So why would somebody go to that extent if there is no truth to it, given that it will have such long-lasting legs? Because let's be honest, consciousness and awareness of these things is never really forgotten once it hits the news. So I feel like it would be probably slightly ill-conceived to share that if she ever has a desire to go back into the political arena.
Yeah, that is true. Like she wouldn't want to say that if she wanted to go into the political arena in the future. Although that's kind of something that the world is working to destigmatize in general, that we're working to destigmatize, is like to not be self-sacrificial anymore, and to like make it okay to prioritize your mental health and to take care of yourself and put yourself first. So, but that's something that like hasn't really been seen really. It made me think of in like 1950 something, like 1952 or earlier, before Queen Elizabeth II became the queen of the United Kingdom. Wasn't it like her her predecessor abdicated? Oh no, this was earlier. So never mind. So one of the previous kings abdicated because he wanted to marry someone, a commoner, I believe.
Uncle,
right?
I feel.
Her uncle. Okay.
Oh no, her uncle abdicated, but I don't know if it was for marriage. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know. I heard that it was because of that, because I don't know. But anyway, so that at the time was like shocking for somebody to like give up power, because they're like, oh, I don't want it because I want to make a different choice in the kind of life I live. It just reminded me of that for some reason. But I feel like perhaps like she's sharing because, well, obviously she needs to provide some reason, because like it's such a like high responsibility position. And I kind of feel like if she didn't want to do it, like that would be the reason, because the reason wouldn't be like, oh, I just don't want to, or I'm not interested anymore, like this is so boring, like everyone would be like, what are you talking about? And I feel like rather than like removing her from the Labor Party's like spotlight to like increase the Labor Party's like chances of winning, I was reading some things and I felt it was true that it kind of makes it a little bit harder for the Labor Party, because I feel like if a leader's stepping down and there's this time of change at an uncertain time, that creates more uncertainty, in the minds of people than if she had served out her whole term. Not to say that her decision was like bad or anything, but just to say that it doesn't seem like something that would like improve her party's standing. Because I was imagining like if Joe Biden was like, you know what, guys, I'm retiring. I'm just so tired of all of this crap. I feel like a lot of Americans would be like, where are you going? Like, we may or may not like you, but we were supposed to have you for another like year and a half. So I don't know. But yeah, it does feel like, I don't know. Maybe there's more to this, but what do you guys feel about it?
Yeah, I felt that it's something we really haven't seen before, and it really speaks to, I feel like it spoke to a strength that of being like honest and vulnerable in that way, because it did feel truthful to me. And I think it speaks to just the larger like mental health that our world is in right now, that like we've gone through a pandemic, and people are like in general just experiencing these feelings of burnout. And I think we're at a point where we can be honest about like our mental health now, because it's like less surprising, or less of a stigma, because it's like, yeah, of course we're all going through a hard time, like with the pandemic and climate change and and just everything that's going on. Like of course everyone is going through something with their mental health, if we're being honest, most likely. And yeah, it's very interesting to see this. I was sad to see it. I love her. I think was such a great, strong leader, and to see what she did with gun control in New Zealand, compared to like what happens in America, I think she did a really amazing job. And then with COVID, there was almost no. They didn't really have to lock down because they had so few cases. Of course, New Zealand is much, much smaller than like America and everything. But yeah, I feel that I'm sad to see her go, but I think it was kind of eye-opening if you look at it from like a world perspective, like, oh, everyone's kind of going through this these mental health problems, or just experiencing some things with mental health right now, and it's okay to be honest about that and to address it and really face it and be like, yeah, this is happening, and it's okay.
Yeah, and I have to agree with you in the sense that when I feel into it, it's almost that waiting to exhale moment that has arrived. Like, you've had all these crises, you've had 3 years of COVID pandemic, you've had a volcanic eruption, you've had to clean up childhood poverty, all at the age of 37, 38, 39. I think it's, if you put it in an age perspective, based on what type of responsibility people would generally shoulder at those kind of ages, I just feel like the responsibility of truly steering a country through those kind of things, it was actually quite early in her leadership career in perspective to very many leaders who are probably quite more seasoned just from an experience point of view. And yes, COVID is something none of us foresaw, but at the same time, if you take 2022 in relation to the previous 3 years, it was a lot about recovery mode. And in that recovery mode, it was probably partially more exhausting than the COVID years. And so it's just all stacks up. And we have to make allowance for the humanness, for the humanity of people, and sit back and go, well, if I was leading a country, how would I have faced it? And how would I be feeling? And what would I need in order to just for myself feel human again, and then feel into a decision? And it makes it puts it in a different perspective. And that's why I still believe that there's true intent behind what you were sharing, and therefore a core choice that says I'm honoring my humanity and my individuality, and I'm going to be honest about it. And I still feel like the honesty in this arena could be a double-edged sword.
Yeah, I agree. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Oh no, you can go.
Oh,
wait.
I want to say I felt too that it was kind of it was kind of a contrast to Joe Biden, because he's another big topic in the news lately, because he is oh my gosh, in his late 70s, is that right? And he's like been saying that he's going to run for re-election, and so then he would end up being president until he was like 85 or something, which is like, that's hardcore, you know. And he's currently has this big documents scandal going on, classified documents, you know, stored in his personal home and things like that. So, but he seems to be taking kind of the opposite approach of being like, I don't know if this is the true intention behind it, but I'm also wondering if he feels like he's like, you know, I'm supposed to be the steward of my country's party. Like, I'm like an elder statesman. I have responsibilities. I can't leave. I can't back down. Like, who else is as well known as me, as likely to win and beat the Republicans in the next election cycle? He's like, I've got to run, whether he like fully wants to or not. You know, I feel like he has the opposite mentality. So, and he did, I mean, and everyone is an individual, but you know, I think that was even more prevalent back in the times when he was like earlier in his career and everything. And maybe, you know what I mean? Like the older generation, that's even more of like a thing of being like, you know, be dutiful, you know, regardless of like how you're feeling. You know, I was thinking that. So
That's
Oh,
go ahead.
sorry. Yeah, well, isn't that what he was elected on as well? Like, who else is gonna represent my party and my country as I do? So it's not that it's a bad thing, but yeah, I see what you mean. And in my head, I can't even imagine a US president stepping down from his function. But also, I do feel like even though we aren't really thinking in these terms or really thinking about it. The parallel between NZ and the US is definitely showing us that maybe there's a change in paradigm in being in what it means to be dutiful to your country. And yeah, I feel like there are a lot of leaderships changes throughout the world, but it's definitely interesting to compare the two. And it's not to say that we will have answers, because it's not about stepping down for him, but there's definitely this age question that has been coming up again and again and again. And yeah, I don't really know. It doesn't seem clear as of now. So it feels like consciousness is still deciding, like, okay, is that a good thing or is that a bad thing, or what should we do? Yeah, but I don't know. How are you American folks thinking about it, feeling about it?
I mean, the thing on my mind is like the comparison between Arden and Biden. I mean, she seems, I mean, obviously, granted, America's a very different country than New Zealand, different problems, etc. But I feel like just comparing the people and how, like, from where they choose to lead from, she seems very much like in tune with herself, and maybe, you know, uses her intuition a bit more as she leads, which is not a common thing at all among politicians. So that's like, obviously that's why the whole uniqueness about the energy, like, I think is very prominent. But I feel like that's kind of like, a lot of leaders can learn something just from her being vulnerable and, you know, like, being a young person, but still being able to make a lot of positive change in a short amount of time. And it's almost maybe like her motivation is just different. You know, I feel like most politicians, they become politicians because it's a very like egocentric thing. You almost have to take on like this personality so you can get votes. And especially in America, like, it's all about the constituents. Like, that's all you hear over and over again. And but it's like the motivations behind it, it's, I don't think, I mean, you might go into politics wanting to do it for a good reason, but I feel like, especially in the American system, it's very hard to like stick to your values and be able to get votes, because we have like this two-party system. And on some level, Joe Biden was right. Like, I feel like he's just an easy vote because Americans have known him for so long. Like, he's been I mean, I think he was a senator in the 80s of Delaware, perhaps, or some state like around that. But
Yeah.
he's just like, I don't know, like, it's just like the energy behind it. Like, it just seems like he's just not staying perhaps true to himself. Like, there's like this, I get like this weird sense of like control. Like, the country, I feel like parts of it is trying to shift to a different sort of political arena, but then there's all this like opposition, or not even, just tension created by like this, the way that it's always been, kind of like the status quo. Yeah, I feel like I kind of rambled at the end, I'm sorry. But say, I don't know if you had any
yeah,
idea.
I wanted to just say one comparison too that I was feeling was the humility and the vulnerability versus like arrogance. And what's the opposite of vulnerability? Like having a wall? I don't know. Invulnerability? No, but that's not it. But like, I feel like Joe in this moment, obviously, yeah, like Jacinda Ardern was showing vulnerability and humility, I would say, because, you know, she could be like, no, I know better than like my closed off could be the word Irene was typing. Yeah, closed off. Like, she could have been like, you know, my body and my mind and my soul are telling me this, but I know better than that, you know, and that would be like arrogance, you know, versus her humility and like listening and being vulnerable, admitting that she needed to step down. Whereas like I feel like, you know, Joe Biden, because I think partly because there feels like there's so much pressure nowadays, and politics have become only more partisan. It's only become more us versus them, and there's become more extreme ideological polarization, that Joe Biden feels very like he can't admit that maybe he made a mistake. Because as far as I know from when I've been reading and stuff, I haven't seen him say, oh, you know, I made a mistake here. Like I was being arrogant, or it was an oversight, or I wasn't supervising my staff well, or something, you know, like he could just come out and say clearly that there's something that went wrong, but instead he's trying to downplay, and he's trying to say, there's nothing to see here, no big deal, because a feeling like that would, you know, hurt him and his party, especially with like people are trying to criminally charge Donald Trump for his handling of classified documents right now, you know, with the hope that maybe he won't be able to run again, you know, in 2024. So I feel like it's one of those classic things where it seems like your interest is being pitted against like the values of honesty, you know, there, and humility. And I feel like he and his party, like in general, although many people are criticizing him, like they're not really being like very forthright about this. I just don't think it's the right approach to be like trying to cover it up, because it doesn't get rid of the vulnerability, you know. It's always you'll feel that, and yeah. So
something that just kind of popped up as you were talking was it's almost the two sides of that self-preservation coin. So you have Arden looking at self-preservation from a mental, emotional stability and health point of view, where you have Biden looking at self-preservation from a deflection, almost perching himself above the fray point of view. And so you very clearly see two very different sides of how self-preservation could actually play out. And if you comparably, I would definitely fall on the side of appreciating the more human side of self-preservation, as opposed to the very almost transactional side of self-preservation. So yeah, it's just something that popped up into my mind. So yeah, I just wanted to share that with you guys, because it's also another perspective where you just see these two sides of the coin, and the one probably feels much more glossy than the other, but I feel like the core of it is still very much directed at self-preservation.
I have to agree, and there's something in Andia's rambling that was very true as well in my mind. It was not rambling actually, but yeah, you did kind of touch on something that made me feel Biden, he was elected because people wanted stability after so long, you know, and maybe they wanted it because he's been there for quite a while, but the way he is handling politics right now feels very 90s to me. And it's interesting that we're going so much into feelings today, because it feels so 90s, and not in the ideas, but it feels very Bush and nothing to see here, very distant, very, you know, but it's just, again, it's just generational. And I think he didn't understand the impact of like accountability and change in like we're in the 2020s, like it's changed so much, and it's all about accountability right now, and I feel maybe that's why they feel so stumped right now in the Democratic Party. The problem is that most of them don't understand or are dead on politics as they see it, and don't understand that maybe for the first time in a while, like the American society wanted and needed to be loved in terms of accountability. And in a very simple way, it should have been very probably simple if they had that culture integrated into how they function. But I feel they grew up with something that looked very different, and that they're attempting to apply right now, and saying like, oh, anyway, I'm Biden, I'm at the head of the state, so it's not gonna have so much impact, but it's definitely gonna have some impact in a way that they don't understand, because they don't understand how much people are in touch with their emotion and also that relationship there, instead of like 30 years ago. So yeah, that was something that I felt. Maybe I'm wrong, but it does feel like there's a gap between how they're handling this right now, and the shifts that we've seen happening in the last 10 years with social media and just like people's consciousness in general.
Yeah. I agree with you. I feel like it's more reflective of like what has happened to American politics, just kind of overall. I don't know. I feel like it's become so formulaic almost in terms of like how it functions. It's just like the same thing every year, same majority. Like you see it like some new faces here and there, you know, like past couple years, Beto has been trying to run for governor in Texas, and he's like considered to be like very progressive and forward thinking and like very oppositional to the status quo and what you usually see from Texas politicians. But you know, he never gets enough votes. Like there always seems to be just like this sort of like resistance to just maybe questioning things and maybe like tweaking things, like changing things. And I feel like that's just kind of indicative of what maybe a lot of newer people or people that are trying to like make a name for themselves that aren't Joe Biden, that haven't been in politics for, you know, most of his life. And it's almost like these people that are just kind of like people that you always see, the Joe Bidens of the world, it's almost like their arrogance, as Sage pointed out, because I feel like there's so much arrogance going into it. Like they refuse to be vulnerable, and so it basically has created a sort of stagnation within our political system where you can't even like disagree with people anymore without some sort of like shouting match, or just like a lot of like people taking offense. Like you just can't have a healthy debate, I feel like. And you know, it wasn't like that maybe 10 years ago, but I feel like it's just gotten more stagnant, and there's little changes here and there at the local level, but at like the main federal level, I feel like there's so much opposition within, there's like so much inner turmoil that it does not allow for anything new to flourish and like really be sustainable. It's like this choice that, you know, is being made in Americans' consciousness that's like creating this. I don't know if Isaiah and Sage, if you agree, but.
Yeah, I agree. I love what Irene said, first of all, that Joe Biden's approach felt very 90s. because it makes me, it's like, like his political style, it's just vintage, and you gotta appreciate that vintage style. But I'm just kidding. It's like he's just unfashionable, but
Well, in certain circles, vintage is fashionable. So this is a little bit of a problem, isn't it? If he's unfashionable, right?
no, no, don't. It's a joke. Yeah, not everything vintage needs to be kept. Okay. Like, I'm looking at like, restrictive gender roles, things like that, wars of colonialism, although that is trying to be brought back, but I don't think it's going to do as well as vinyl at being brought back. But I feel like the only person who has really innovated, though, at the federal scale has been Donald Trump. But he innovated by being so, like, I'm not saying that he was honest, because he was actually
outrageous.
by being so outrageous, and by being so no filter in a way. Like, he wasn't completely no filter, but by
He
the
was
way,
very unpresidential. And there's like this presidential persona, and he did not have that. But that is innovative, though.
Yeah, and in a way, like, it's kind of a good thing for American politics. No, I'm not.
Ladies and gentlemen, I feel like we're reaching a little bit.
No, I'm not.
Innovative. I know we're probably trying to look at value in a certain way, but I feel like we're reaching, and we're probably being far too generous under this circumstance. Like, there is value in calling a spade a freaking shovel. So let's also be clear.
No, I'm not saying that, like, it was a great innovation for him to be like massively corrupt, to abuse his power, to lie blatantly, to target minority groups unceasingly, but it was more like that personal, that style of being like like that, what you said about like Bush, like the distance, and politicians being like, high up in the imperial court and far away from the common people, quote unquote, like that feeling. I feel like it really dissolved, and it kind of led to, like, Joe Biden. I think he's the first sitting president for the FBI to raid his personal home, like, while he was president, right? And that's unprecedented. But I feel like Trump, although he ushered in many things that were very regressive, he also ushered in like this feeling that, the top elected officials are people too, and that we shouldn't think of them as like so high and removed from ourselves. He really leveled everything, And I'm not saying that it was in like a wonderful, loving way. I'm saying it was in his way.
Definitely not a loving way for Trump. Yes, but also it was a communication stunt that extreme leaders of parties use to make themselves seem as though they are outsiders when they're well integrated into the system. The only difference is that it continued to outrageously do this throughout his mandate. But yeah, communication stunt, most probably. And yes, a little bit of truth to it as well. And I have to agree with Andrew again. There's something about a formula in the United States that just is, and that's why these leaders that have been senators and that are in power right now, were in power, are so well integrated, and it's easy for them to win. And we have to accept that it's the system, and because it's a system that has been around for a few hundred years, it's going to take time to change. But there's almost that shadow side to it, that downside, that is the arrogance of not trying to like cool down and take a a good decision there. And that's where we're going full circle, in that sense that they could take lessons from Arden there, because it definitely seems like he didn't he definitely went in tune with what the people were communicating to him and what he was communicating to himself. But maybe that's a story for another day. Dare I say that maybe he's using some of the communications from Obama, but it felt really different because Obama had to not enter into the drama because it was so racially involved and so drama-filled to begin with. But it's not good to stay on the same communication when it's so different. It's so subtle, you know. And the problem is that in today's politics, we're applying formulas to things that require feeling this out, subtlety, and maybe adapting, having nuance in things. And that's what I don't get about politics right now, is that, yeah, we're trying to apply the formulas of parties on things that should be discussed and felt out. And yeah, maybe that's just my opinion, but yeah.
So I think something else that we also need to will take cognizance of and bring into awareness is we're seeing two perspectives of leadership. And we're seeing it very specifically from the form of the divine masculine versus the form of the divine feminine, and how they respond in their leadership style, and how they lead, and how they show up, and what people tend to value seeing from them. And these two are they're really role modeling it really well from the perspective of, from an Arden point of view, you can see the level of intuitive leadership, the level of almost personal well-being playing out in a style of leadership where you're seeing a very 90s closed off masculine form of don't ask questions, it's fine kind of leadership. And that they're really role modeling this for us really well and showing us a nice test case of the evolution of leadership, the evolution of what people are expecting and valuing from leadership. So they're also probably playing their parts really well and serving their purpose really well right now.
I have to, I feel like, it's like going back to Joe Biden and just American politics in general, I feel like it has to get to a point of contrast where it's just like so obvious that things need to change. At least a little bit, you know, like nothing radical, but just in the sort of values we choose as like citizens of America, and I feel like the whole value of just the political system it's you know, it doesn't reflect like kind of like the ethos of this country, like the things that it was so you know, founded upon, and the things that most Americans take so much pride in. But it's it's very hollow, you know, especially when there are, you know, clear issues, but leaders aren't willing to be vulnerable. So like everyone does play a role. Donald Trump played a role. Joe Biden plays a role. Jacinda Ardern plays a role. So it's something is shifting. So it's interesting to see like what these shifts will produce, like what the effects will be later on. Positive, hopefully, you know.
Yeah, and I think something else that's actually quite quite good playing out right now. We're seeing these two almost opposite sides of leadership in a space where people are starting to think about upcoming elections. So I know you guys are going to go through your elections in the next couple of years. South Africa is going through elections in the next couple of years. There's a lot of running, sort of almost this runner-up process to reconsider what we would look for in leaders, and specifically political leaders. And I feel like this is just surfacing that contrast that says, pay attention, look at what's happening, look at what you value, and then make your choices in line with your values. So it's probably perfectly timed and perfectly playing out.
Yeah, I wanted to ask do you guys feel like moving on to our last topic about the job security in big tech? Did you guys want to transition into that a little bit? Yeah. Because I felt like we reached like completion with that, and how they're excellent like foils, you know. Yeah, well, sorry, I'm not the most like well read in this subject or anything like that, but I just thought it was interesting, and how they like hired a lot during the pandemic, where maybe there was like a huge boost for them, and then like now they're just cutting a lot of people off. And it reminds me of what Jeff and Shaleia have said about like the markets today, if they're like based on ego, illusion, or like fear, and there are those miscalculations caused by fear and the instability, you're going to have that. Because I thought it was interesting just to notice that as an example. And yeah, did you guys have any feelings or insights about it?
Yeah, I think it's general. I didn't think about that until right now, but in my company, which is a big group, multinational kind of system, they recruited and hired in waves until this summer. And because we were still feeling, I guess, the effects of digital marketing and how much it has grown throughout the years of COVID. And it's still growing, but it's shifting as well. And so what they were experiencing after September of 2022 was a drop in just about every aspects of like digital marketing. Although they're still growing in a way, there is also less need for internal communication and customer client services and things like that. And with AI coming in big as well, I feel there's a lot of shifts. And so we had a lot of like basically meetings at the beginning of 2023, because that's where you do kind of the checkup of a company. You test the health of a company. And so that's where you also take the decision to lay off people. And so it's funny, I don't think it was something that they copied on Twitter or anyone else. It's just that it happens to be the same, I guess, format for a lot of companies in the way they work in their system. That said, I don't know if it's kind of fair. Obviously, I don't think it is, but yeah, that's what it's reflecting about our system and markets right now.
I want to echo that. I think there's a component that companies weren't necessarily geared for the level of shift into those online and digital platforms that was required during those years of the pandemic. And so generally, when that is not as well strategized, it always gets the problem is that it always first has a people related response to it, in the fact that we ramp up hiring. And as we evolve and as we find synergy and efficiencies in those processes, we naturally are going to feel that we're over-resourced. The challenge is that over-resourced component is happening at the same time when there are shifts in the market and the cost of living has shifted because of gas and fuel and all those other prices and commodity prices and all those things. So it's kind of a double whammy, in that they're giving some of these big tech companies are giving significant layoff packages. But what's happening is that the market is now being saturated with tech skill, which means that people with tech skill lose their bargaining power when they go into new positions. So there's a lot of nuances to what's happening here that we mustn't lose sight of. So yes, in the short term, they're kind of cared for because they're getting some significant layoff packages. But in the long term, the market is saturated with skills, which means the power that used to sit with employees probably 12 to 18 months ago will shift more in favor of the employer. So that thing about the great resignation starts to become less of a threat, because the market is being saturated with skills that would have been scarce at some point. So it shifts a lot of perspectives. There's a lot of change that will hit that job market, and a lot of insecurity because of it. Because the power was imbalanced, in the sense that companies needed those skills, which now has partially reversed and probably will continue to reverse as they continue to make significant investments in AI.
I feel like this is also related to an aspect of leadership, and just like going back to the motivations that individuals have when they come into certain positions of power, whether it's the prime minister of a country or the CEO of a tech company. I feel like you need to really be like connected to yourself and just have a sense of like your own humanity, and like bearing witness to that and being able to bring that forth in leading people and in whatever you do, really. But I feel like a sign of a good leader is like someone that can really like connect to the people that are, that they are essentially in charge of. And I think the values once again have become so watered down, and it's like we mentioned that Jeff and Shaleia said that the markets are just based on ego, and there's so much of that going on that leaders aren't making, or most leaders aren't making decisions based on love. It's based on this fear and like maximizing profits and like making sure the shareholders are happy, and they do not care about the employees. Like the heart of the company is not a top consideration. And I feel like that is a huge problem in like what is playing out here. I mean, that's the sense that I'm getting.
I definitely feel like this topic, from almost job security leadership in corporates kind of perspective needs to be explored further. But for now, I think we are on our hours. I'm going to say thank you to everybody for our conversation today. And to those who have followed and like and subscribe, please also feel free to like and subscribe to our Church of Union YouTube channel, where you'll find this conversation and all our previous others. And we look forward to seeing you all next week for another conversation in our series. Thank you, everybody. Bye-bye.
Bye.